Welcome back to Start Kyle Orton. Folks, a birch is a tree, and Travis is a man. And Kyle, he's a hedge. It's time to talk about the Bears offense. Kyle, are you ready to hedge your bets today on this Bears offense?
Are we making predictions? Is that what you want me to do? I was just going to go through... Oh, I wasn't going there yet. I was gonna...
that's what you're doing. You're doing it right now.
Okay, so tonight, folks, we're done with the draft, which a lot of you've noticed because you've stopped listening for now, which hurts our feelings. I'm just kidding. You're free to leave whenever you want. I'm not gonna cling to your legs and cry and ask you to listen to me and validate me and my ginormous ego.
He will do that. He absolutely will.
I totally will. Oh God, yes. No. So we're done with the draft content for a while, and we have entered the long, dark off season of the soul. We've got about 2 months to try to fill some content between now and training camp when the people are ready for the Bears content again, and the Bears content will flow hot and heavy. So as just a matter of housekeeping, I want to prep you folks for what's coming in these next few weeks. So this week and next week, Travis and I are going to look at the roster by position group. We're going to start with the offense tonight, defense tomorrow. Just looking at these position groups and how we feel about each position group and the depth and the roster as it stands right now, having gone through the two main parts of the player acquisition cycle. We're done with free agency. Big free agency we're done with. Maybe not all free agency. You would still think maybe at least 1 or 2 more guys are coming before camp breaks. Kind of like they added Reef and Schofield late. You might see that more on the defensive line this year. But yeah, we're going to break down how the roster stands now. And then we're excited to tell you that in a couple weeks, our sometimes mentioned former member of our triumvirate is coming back. Eric is going to join us to talk something that he is very good at. We are going to discuss terrible Bears football players because I want to start the hype train now. I want to get you folks hyped. 10 years ago, we did a tournament. It was the worst Bears players of our lifetime on the podcast way back when. And this year, we are bringing that tournament back. We are revisiting it because, as you might have noticed, in the last 10 years of Bears football, there have been some more bad players to really add into the mix. And I will say, Travis was a little upset about this, but we are changing the rules of that tournament. It used to be best Bears players of our lifetime. I think this new one, we're going to do the worst Bears players just of the last 20 years. Because the last time we did it, really, our lifespans had basically only been 20 years. So we're dealing with more or less the same time frame. But this also meant grandfathering the tournament's winner last time, who was former Bears quarterback Cade McNown, grandfathering him out of the tournament so as to prevent him from walking to another victory anyways. So we will be revisiting the Bad Bears tournament moving it from the last 20 years. Eric will be joining us for that. So in a couple weeks we will start by having an entire episode where we fight over who is actually going to get into the tournament, and then we will do the tournament itself. So we are excited about that. We know this is the time of year when folks really like to turn to remembering some guys, and we're very good at remembering some guys. So we'll get to that in a few weeks. So that's that. So we will find ways to fill the content void in your soul as the football season reaches the dead portion. But tonight,
I think the idea is just stack some episodes that are not time dependent, things that you could listen to now, things that if you're coming back at the end of July, early August, when that football bug comes back and hits you again, and we get out of this horrible 2-month period we always get into at the NFL, you're gonna have like 8 to 10 episodes. You can just fill your whole queue with Start Kyle Orton if you want, really.
Yeah, absolutely. We will drown you in content. But tonight we are going to look at where this roster is at the moment, and we're starting on offense. So we'll start with the most important position, and we are not going to spend, we should not spend, in my opinion, too much time on the number one gentleman at this position right now. Because, one, if you have listened to this podcast so far and you haven't picked up that we are generally pretty optimistic and positive about Justin Fields, you need to practice your active listening, guys. You need to work on your active listening skills. You might be hearing us, but you're not listening to us. Two, we're going to do one of the content episodes we intend to do here at some point is just the Justin Fields episode. We are going to lay it all on the table, the good, the bad, the ugly, our hopes, our dreams, our fears, the reasons why I suspect maybe my parents didn't love me enough. We're going to put all that out there in just one episode. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on Justin Fields tonight. But suffice it to say, if I had to describe in one word how we feel about him, it's good.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How are we going to stretch that out into an hour?
I mean, I've got stats. You know, I love stats. I've got them. I want to discuss them. It might just be a whole episode of me punching the invisible haters and the arguments that they have set forth, the heresies they have set forth against our boy, and I shall refute them, and I shall call them blasphemers. But yeah, no, the quarterback position right now on the roster, the Bears have Justin Fields and the presumptive backup, P.J. Walker. And for that quarterback 3 spot that usually ends up on the practice squad, it's been a long time, really, since carrying 3 quarterbacks was the norm. Ever since they got rid of the emergency quarterback rule. But yeah, so the other 2 guys competing for that 3rd spot, that practice squad spot, are, of course, the Peterman, a legend in his own right, and Tyson Bagent, who, I have to be honest with you, I had never heard of this university that he attended. It was a Division II university called Shepherd University. Are you familiar with that, Travis?
Yeah, of course. They train border collies there and animal husbandry like all over the sheep, Kyle. Shepherd, just massive university populating the world with sheep farmers. Yeah.
Okay, right. Oh, I would have thought that would be West Virginia. So,
no, coal miners.
Okay, yeah. But I will say, I did Google this man, this Tyson Bagent, and he put up some numbers the last 2 years at Shepherd. Would you like to hear the numbers?
I guess.
Let's do this. Okay, so in 2021, our friend here completed 67.5% of his passes for 5,000 yards in 15 games with 53 touchdowns.
Holy shit.
And in 2022, this most recent year, he did drop off a little bit to 4,580 yards and 41 touchdowns. So for his college career, this gentleman had 159 touchdowns versus just 48 interceptions. So a quite productive shepherd he was. He tended his flock well. Do you have any thoughts on Tyson Bagent, Travis?
I have no thoughts.
You have no thoughts?
Tyson Bagent is not going to make this team. That's my thought.
The only thought I had about Tyson Bagent was that I spent like 5 minutes trying to remember what was the name of the kid. Do you remember he was with the Bears, I think, a couple preseasons during the Tressman era. He went to like Platteville or something, and I remember he put up some preseason numbers, and Bears fans, of course, back in those days were just so desperate for anybody who wasn't Jay Cutler. I remember having at least one guy argue with me about this dude as like a real possibility. And so Tyson Bagent just made me think of that guy, and it took me a good 5 minutes to think of this person, and I believe his name, I think it was Matt Blanchard. Do you remember Matt Blanchard? Was it Bears preseason legend?
Is he related to Tully? Is he Tully's son?
I have no idea who that is.
I love making references you don't understand.
Is that a wrestling reference or like
It is a wrestling reference.
Okay.
Good job.
He played wasn't Platteville. It was Matt Blanchard played for Wisconsin Whitewater.
Okay.
And yeah, he was with the Bears for the 2012 and 2013 preseasons. So. Yeah. So I think it's safe to say
quarterback in Rafters history.
Yeah, so I think it's safe to say, obviously, Fields is going to be QB1, PJ Walker is going to be QB2, Nathan Peterman is here to take some preseason snaps and probably cash a check from the practice squad, assuming... I don't know what the practice squad eligibility requirements are anymore. It used to be that, like, if you appeared in, like, 4 real games, you could never be on a practice squad, and now the practice squad just seems to be, like, where the coach's favorite clipboard holder gets a lifetime pension.
Yes.
So yeah, Tyson Bagent might have his chance at being the practice squad guy. That's a riveting battle to watch this preseason, versus the legend Nathan the Peterman. But no, let's talk about PJ Walker though for a second. Yeah. As a backup quarterback, so he falls into, in my opinion, there are like 4 types of backup quarterback.
Ooh.
There is the young guy itching for his chance.
Okay.
There is the quarterback competition backup, which usually means that your starter's not very good. So you've got like
Dalton.
You got your Dalton versus Foles or something like that, or you have your guy that you hope can win a game or 2 if he has to, like that you can keep running your offense with. And then you have the tank commander, which is what the Bears used, Peterman and Trevor Siemian and whatnot for last year, which is that, like, if you come in, you are not there to do anything other than help us secure the best possible draft pick. And so I do think P.J. Walker falls into that category and signals that the Bears are at least going to try to win some football games this year, because P.J. Walker, the hope is clearly there that if Fields has a season like he had last year where he plays most of it, but he's banged up in a couple games and he misses 1 or 2 games. Obviously, the hope is that P.J. Walker lets you keep that QB run game, keep some of those deep balls in there, doesn't force you to change your playbook, and the goal is to try to eke out a win or 2 in a Fields absence. So I think that's what you're looking for with a backup like P.J. And I think he was probably a smart option if that's what they're looking for. Is that how you feel about him?
Yeah, a few months ago we had talked about potentially picking up as a late round pick Dorian Thompson-Robertson for the same reason. We thought, well, here's a guy you could just plant behind Justin, you could throw in for a couple games, and you don't change the offense, right? Instead, the Bears went out, they got P.J. Walker, who I just personally like, ex-XFL guy, just a wonderful man. And he's not Justin Fields, but you aren't going to change anything when he goes into the game, right?
Yeah. Well, and he also, he has that pre-existing chemistry with DJ Moore too.
He does.
That should come. They had the longest pass play in the NFL together last year.
Yeah. So PJ is more of a McCown kind of backup, right? He's a guy who knows what he has at receiver, and he is willing to let them do the work.
Yeah.
Right?
He did not play afraid at all. He played with a little too much dip on his chip at times with the Panthers last year. You definitely want, the confidence was admirable at times. Yeah. It really was. But I think you wanted us to make some predictions. I don't think I'm ready to do predictions tonight. I think I will wait. I think that could be our last thing before the regular season starts, is to actually make some concrete predictions. But I will. What I'm going to ask you as we go through these position groups this episode and next episode, do you feel better, worse, or about the same about this quarterback room than you did last year?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not going to give number predictions, but I will kind of rank where I think these guys end up right now. Give you a little bit of that spice. I think, obviously, in this case, it's better. I think Siemian, in terms of quality at the quarterback position, you could argue one way or the other for Siemian or P.J. Walker, but as far as fit for this offense, for this team, just coming in for Justin Fields randomly in a game, it didn't really make any sense. You're just not going to run the same offense with Siemian as you are with Fields. So with Walker, it's just if he's the kind of guy who, if he comes in halfway through a game, the other team is going to be like, that's great. And then he's going to be like, fuck you, I'm going to throw it 40 yards downfield. They won't expect it, and we're going to get some points out of it because he's a wild man.
So Siemian actually...
definitely a shot to win.
Siemian last year, I think, actually is backup quarterback category number 5 that I forgot to mention, which is the guy who's literally just there to help the starter learn the playbook. Yeah. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember when Mark Sanchez was with the Jets. Who his backup quarterback was the first couple years there. Mm-mm. It was like a 40-year-old Mark Brunell who literally at one point admitted that he only took the job because he needed the money because he had gone bankrupt investing in Whataburger franchises. Oh, God. And, the thing is, the Jets knew that if Mark Sanchez got hurt and they had to actually play Mark Brunell, they were not going to win games with Mark Brunell at that point. It had been 10 years since he could throw a football at that juncture. They just wanted someone who wasn't going to make their starter feel threatened and was also going to help him, learn how to be an NFL quarterback. That was what was important to them. So
I mean, you probably didn't have to go that far back. Given their reticence to play Joe Flacco last year, you might think that's what they were doing last year.
Quite possible.
Too, right?
Quite possible, yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's what I think Steve. I think he was there to help Justin learn the footwork of the West Coast offense and tell him how to go through, help him learn how to go through progressions and stuff. He was obviously never meant to they weren't trying to win games with Justin Fields, so they definitely weren't trying to win them with Trevor Siemian, was the thing. This year, obviously, the hope is they're competitive, they're flirting with a wild card spot at least, and if Fields goes down, you want someone who can hopefully help you finish out a game with a win or win a game or two in a Fields' absence. Obviously, anything longer than that, you're not going to win a lot of games because, I mean, there just aren't that many quarterbacks who can win a lot of games in the NFL right now. So, but yeah, overall, I definitely feel better about the quarterback room than I did last year.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So, next, I think we transition into what maybe you'll disagree with me. If you had to ask me one position group on the entire Bears roster right now that I feel the best about in terms of top depth, etc., it is the running back room. I think that they have gone out and they have done a fantastic job assembling a 3 to 4 guys that I think all complement each other really well, that I think can make a great rotation, that I think will let them do more things than they were able to do last year with their running backs. So right now they've got Khalil Herbert, who is your presumptive starter. I think if you had to ask, even with the addition of some of the you're gonna go all about Donta, aren't you?
I think it's a pure toss-up.
You think it's a complete toss-up? Okay.
Yeah.
I think incumbency is what Khalil Herbert's got going for him right now, plus explosiveness. Sure. I do think he is still the most explosive back on the roster.
Yep.
And I do think that's important, especially because, I mean, this is something that drove me nuts about David Montgomery. The mere presence of Justin Fields and the attention he demands from defenses opens up those wide-ass cutback lanes. And Herbert is so good at taking that one cut and going whoop and taking 20 freaking yards like that. And David Montgomery was so bad at it. He just left so many yards of the field. There was actually a chart going around today about running backs and rushing yards over expected, and how Herbert was second highest in the NFL in that category. He got way more yards than you would expect an average running back to get in his same situation, because he had really good vision for those cutback lanes, and he was explosive. And David Montgomery was one of the worst, because he's just not explosive at all. But yeah, they've got Khalil Herbert, they've got Donta Foreman, they've got Travis Homer, they've got Rashawn Johnson, and they've got Treston Ebner, which I think, we can agree he's fucked, right? Treston Ebner's not making this roster. Yes. Not happening.
He got 1 year.
He got one chance.
And now he's gone. I'm sorry.
I mean, I will say this. You know how... So you talked about this with Anthony Richardson, about how you learned that watching a quarterback throw the ball away could be exciting. Or when Javier Baez, you would realize that watching a guy make a tag could be exciting. Mm-hmm. Treston Ebner was, in a way, he was kind of exciting for me, because I have never seen a guy be so bad at just getting out into the pattern on a screen. He failed epically every single time they asked him to do it. It was like
very true.
Like that man just bumper cars trying to be like panicking, could not leak out. I mean, there were 2 sacks I think in the Falcons game that were almost back to back. Both times, like Getsy wasn't trying to pick up shit. He was just trying to get a couple fucking screens and get out of town. And both times Justin Fields got sacked because Ebner just ran right into his offensive line and could not leak out to catch the fucking screen. So, and he was drafted to be, maybe the change of pace, receiver running back, your Tariq Cohen light kind of guy. And so if you're that bad at that part of the job, goodbye. You're not bringing anything to the table. So, I feel very good otherwise. So Ebner's gone, but I think of the 4 guys who remain, I do think they all add. I mean, Khalil Herbert is a burner. Donta Foreman is a bruiser, and a bruiser in the best way. I mean, he had, I think, I can't remember what the stat was, but was ranked very highly in the NFL in terms of yards after contact, just fights through tackles. Travis Homer, I talked about, I think is a guy that is kind of underrated as a pass blocking running back, and I think maybe was underutilized in Seattle as a receiver. And then you have Rashawn Johnson, who Ryan Poles keeps mentioning. They did not expect Rashawn Johnson to be available when they picked in the 4th round. They ran these 53 simulations, he said, and none of them he was there. I don't know that their game plan for the season ever included actually drafting this guy.
No, I agree.
I think they literally, that was the most best player available, because they had kind of constructed what was in my opinion, a very well-balanced room before the draft, to where you could argue they didn't need another running back. But then I think Poles was like, well, shit. I mean, this guy could just simplify things and eventually become the every down back that we don't currently have. So, but I also like that. I also like that they don't need him. They don't need him to be that guy. And I think it'd be awesome if, as a rookie, his pass pro skills from college translated, because he was a very good pass pro running back in college. I think it'd be awesome if his hands as a receiver translated. And sometimes it does translate as a rookie, and sometimes it doesn't. I don't think they need it to. If he doesn't end up being a rookie sensation, that's not the end of the world. But it could be a very good problem to have if you're looking at Rashawn Johnson after training camp and you're like, we got to find a way to get this guy on the field. I know Herbert's great. I know we like Donta Foreman. I know we thought Homer was going to have a bigger role here than he had in Seattle. But I'm not one of those people that's like, Rashawn Johnson's going to win the job by week 1, but it could happen. I feel very good about him as a player. I think it'd be a good problem to have if it did happen.
Yeah. I mean, I feel bad for Homer because, like you said, and like we've done at several other positions on this team, they built a room that is extremely balanced, that covers for each other's weaknesses, that works very well together. And the running back room, with Herbert being, the guy who's, like you said, great agility, going to get down the field, nice explosiveness. Donta being the thunder to his lightning, and then you had Homer, who we kind of thought well, that guy's coming in to block when he needs to, and he's going to play special teams, right? And I absolutely agree. I just don't think they ever thought they would get Rashawn Johnson in the 4th round. They seem to think he had a late 2nd round grade, something like that, and he made it all the way to them, and they had to pull the trigger. And I think Homer's getting pushed out almost completely to special teams.
Yeah, I mean,
there's going to be a point in the season, you'd think, where if Roshan's skills, like you said, translate, if he could block as well as he did in college, if he's as good catching the ball as he was in college, they're going to be like, why don't we just have this guy in every down? What's the point of keeping Khalil in, who can't block? So people know that he's a non-threat there on those plays. Donta, he's not a guy who's going to catch, but Roshan, it could be anything. The play could be anything, and he's going to play well with it. So, I mean, I think you're right. The running back room is probably the best position group we have. We almost have too many running backs.
Yeah, and the other thing I like about this, too, is last year, that Herbert injury, when he missed a significant amount of time, that really freaking boned them.
There was a period of time before that injury where Herbert was looking like...
He's averaging. He was averaging like 7 yards per carry. It was insane. So when Herbert went down, it's not just that they lost their home run threat. It was that the other running backs they had on the roster, they weren't really running backs. Like, Darrington Evans is a special teams guy. Tristan Ebner was brought in to be like a receiving-only running back, and he wasn't even good at that. Like, they literally didn't have anyone other than Monty that they could give real carries to. And as we've discussed, Monty, good guy, hardworking dude, tough dude, just not explosive, slow, plodding. It really, and what you saw the QB run game really take a hit after that too, because every time they tried to run some of that option stuff that they were doing, you just saw 2 guys go after Fields on every option pitch, because they're like, what are you going to do? Pitch it to Montgomery for 3 yards? Fine. Make our day, go ahead. And I feel like this year's room is way more insulated against injury, because, you're not screwed if Donta Foreman has to get 20 carries in a game, and I don't think you're going to be screwed if Khalil Herbert's getting 20 carries in a game, and I don't think you're going to be screwed if Rashawn Johnson's getting 20 carries in a game. You might be a little screwed if Travis Homer is getting 20 carries in a game. That's probably not the scenario we want to end up with.
Only way that happens is if angry Iowa running back hating God finally migrates to the Chicago Bears.
So I think this is the one position group on the entire team where I am like, they could survive 2 injuries and still, I think, be good. So yeah, I would have to say, if you're asking me, better or worse than last year, 100% feeling better about the running back room in terms of ceiling, in terms of floor, in terms of depth. Absolutely, feel much better about this room.
Yeah, if I had to put a ranking on this running back room, just around the NFL, just based on depth, it's probably top 5. Depending on if Herbert can do what he did last year in short bursts over the long haul, this could be, especially with Fields at quarterback, this could be the best running team in the league by a mile. So
well, I would hope, given the resources they've invested into it, the best running team in the league should be the Atlanta Falcons. And if they're not, good lord. We talked about
we'll talk about Terry Algier later if you want.
Yeah. Well, just as a sidebar, we did talk about this a little bit, though. Like, when people talked about the Bijan Robinson thing, it was entirely in terms of just, like, in an abstract, do you take a running back that high? And I definitely didn't want the Bears to do it, but I was a little sympathetic to the argument that, like, this was kind of a weird draft, and he's a surefire top 10 talent, sometimes you just take the best player on the board. But I do think it's worth noting that, like, for the Falcons specifically, they spent the 8th overall pick on a guy who's, you would have to be really, really good as a rookie to be even like a 10% improvement on what Algier gave them just last year. Mm-hmm. I think I used LaDainian Tomlinson's rookie year as the example. Like, even if he had LaDainian Tomlinson's rookie year, that's barely, that's like a 10 to 15% improvement over what Tyler Algier did last year. That's a hell of a pick. Hell of a lot to give up for such a marginal improvement, especially when you have the Bears running back room as an example. I think they have substantially upgraded this room, and it's cheaper than it was last year. It's certainly cheaper than it would have been to retain David Montgomery at what the Lions paid him, and all it cost them was, a couple not really guaranteed contracts to Foreman and Homer and a 4th round pick. So
just running backs around the league, it's hard to understand. Donta Foreman, 1 year, $4 million. David Montgomery, 3 years, $18 million to the Lions, and then the Lions
will use the 12th overall pick.
The 12th overall pick on a running back. It doesn't make it. I can't make sense of it, so I'm not going to try.
Yeah. Anyways, so the running back room, absolutely feel better. Probably the deepest, best unit on the team right now, for what that's worth. And as we know, running the unfortunately downside of it is the Bears probably were the best running team in football last year, and they won 3 games. So there is a limited utility to having the best run game in football, but it's better to have it than not have it. And I do think, once again, they should have it.
Yep.
So the next unit we will move on to is definitely what I would consider to be the most upgraded unit of any on the team so far, and that is, of course,
fullback.
Yes. No. There, should we even mention fullback? Because, of course,
Kyrie Blasingame is still
he's
there.
still there. And that dude, I mean, I will say this. You know how excited I was last year when the Bears actually brought a fullback back?
Yeah.
Blasingame is really good at what he does. And you can look at the rush numbers with him on the field versus without him. That dude, as far as so if we're rating the fullback room, which is just him, I love that dude. I'm glad they brought him back. I think he's a good fullback to have.
A+ fullback game, Bears.
Absolutely, yes. So,
what were you talking about?
The wide receiver room, I think, is the most upgraded unit on the team. Now, the funny thing about it is, we were going through, I think that one list, we were trying to figure out where exactly this wide receiver room ranks in the league.
We did.
And I have them as, maybe the 13th best wide receiver room in the NFL, but that is such a massive improvement from last year entering camp when they were clearly, number 32. And if you threw in a couple college programs like Ohio State, they would be down at 38. So I do think they're the most massively upgraded room position group on the team. I will have to say it's very funny. They re-signed Dante Pettis and ESB. They announced this. They had re-signed Equinemius St. Brown before the season even ended, and they announced Dante Pettis a week before the draft. And I had literally already forgotten that both of those guys were technically back so here's the room. Here's the wide receiver group as it stands, and I'm just reading these guys off in alphabetical order from the Bears website, not in terms of the depth chart. So we've got Chase Claypool, obviously. Aaron Crookshank. I don't know who this guy is, but he's 5'9", 165 pounds, so almost as big as the Vikings' first-round pick. Yes, Vikings fans, I'm nourished by your hatred.
Still fucking on it.
Darius Fountain, I don't remember this man. Was he on the team? He's from Northern Iowa. Never mind. Go Panthers. He's gonna rock this shit. Velus Jones, that's funny. They have him listed as a wide receiver. He gets to be with the other guys and everything. That's adorable.
Wow.
Darnell Mooney, I remember that guy. DJ Moore, I've heard good things. Dante Pettis, a guy named, I'm going to assume this was pronounced Tyrick Pitts from Delaware. Joe Reed, there's some futures contract guys on here, I think.
Yeah.
Tyler Scott, Equinemius St. Brown, and Nasimba Webster. So I think we can just not talk about half of those guys I just listed off. So I really think for the purpose of this discussion, there's DJ Moore, there's Darnell Mooney, there's Chase Claypool, there's Tyler Scott, Velus Jones, Equinemius St. Brown, and Dante Pettis. So there's 7 guys there. Is that right? Moore, yep. Mooney, Clay. Okay. Last year, they carried 6 into the season. So assuming they do the same, one of those dudes has got to go. And I think the easy answer, right now, is just assume it's one of St. Brown or Pettis. But I think the fact that they even bothered to re-sign those guys at all really says that if I were Velus Jones, I would be doing everything I can to have a robot shoot punts at me just all off season long, because, bro, I think your best chance of making the roster is to figure out how to not muff every punt that comes your way.
You better be on special teams, that's for sure.
Because, I think as a current year 4th round pick, Tyler Scott is obviously safe. Next year he might not be. And I think one of the best things about Ryan Poles, and we have mentioned this before, is he does not seem like he plays favorites, and he does not seem like he lets sunk cost affect him at all. He gave the 32nd overall pick for Chase Claypool, and when that move didn't look like it was paying dividends immediately, he moved heaven and earth to get DJ Moore. He did not just do what Jerry Angelo would have done, which is say, well, we still think Chase could be a number 1. That was our big move. We're not going to spend the 32nd overall pick to get a guy and then keep adding to it or whatever. I don't think he's attached to Velus. I think even as a 3rd round pick last year, I think Velas is going to have to put up or shut up in camp this year because Dante Pettis, I don't want to see him get any more reps on offense this year. I have psychological damage from that man's hands. But Dante Pettis is he's a good punt returner. He wasn't bad at returning punts last year. And I think that's specifically why he was resigned. I think they are saying, like, look, Velas, either you're going to learn how to return punts or you're not going to be on this roster. We'll just have Dante return punts. Yeah. The one that's a little hard for me to imagine staying anymore now that Tyler Scott's on the roster is Equinemius St. Brown. I think that contract...
Really? That stuns me. I would think the opposite.
He does not play special teams, which is quite a luxury for wide receiver 5.
Okay, well, see, I was just about to go into a whole thing about ESB, so I will do that.
Do it. Do a whole thing on ESBS. I'll do it. Give me the
Here's
whole
the
thing.
deal. The difference between last year and this year, Equinemius St. Brown last year was in a place where he had to be a wide receiver 2, and he does not belong there. And he never has throughout his entire NFL career. But the perfect place for Equinemius St. Brown is a wide receiver 4. Because that dude run blocks like a machine. He will line up in 4 wide receiver sets, and he can allow Justin Fields to get out on a speed option.
I'm just warning you.
We talked about this.
Hold on, I'm just going to stop you. I'm just warning you right now. There is a guy who's a friend of mine who listens to this podcast, talks to me about it every week. I'm going to shout about right now. Hi, Rudy. This man loathes Equinemius St. Brown.
Does he make tacos?
He loathes Equinemius St. Brown so much. And he hates when people cite run blocking because in his opinion that's not what a wide receiver should do. So I just want you to know, Travis, at this very moment you're making a mortal enemy of loyal listener Rudy. So
let me
apologize to Rudy as you do it. Yes, do it.
Let me talk directly to Rudy. All right, Rudy, here's the deal. You're right. When it comes to a wide receiver who is meant to play as a number 1 option, as a number 2 option, as a number 3 option, they should not be good at run blocking. However, when you are building a team where every wide receiver fills a particular spot, where all of the wide receivers complement each other like we have, you've got DJ Moore at the number 1 spot, Chase Claypool is the outside threat, the number 2, not eating up that number 1 corner anymore. He's going to have a great year. Darnell Mooney gets to focus in the slot where he is extremely good, extremely talented. That's having a fringe number 1 guy as maybe your number 3 wide receiver option, maybe your number 4 option on a pass play, depending on where Kmet is going. And so with all of those guys on the field, what's left is, if you want to run a spread concept, maybe you want a guy out there who can run block. You spread the field, you run Justin at a guy, and yeah, it's a wide receiver, but it's a dude who can block. Now, here's the deal. Do I want to watch Equinemius St. Brown come slow out of a break again and cause an interception? No, I would rather die than watch that again. But this year, when he's coming in and we're saying, I don't know, maybe you could cut him, if he makes this roster and he is that number 4 wide receiver, I think he's going to spend a lot of time out there doing the dirty work, essentially, in these spread concept plays. And I think that's enough to keep a guy like him on the roster instead of the other option, if you got rid of him, is keep Pettis and Velus Jones, and Tyler Scott at the same time. I don't see that. I don't see keeping all 3 of those guys, and Scott is definitely staying. I think, like you said, this is basically a special teams competition. It's who's better at special teams, Velus Jones or Dante Pettis. That's the one we're keeping.
Interesting. And I will say, ESB knows the playbook, knows this offense in and out. That's what they always say. He's obviously been with it going back to his Green Bay days with Getsy. Getsy was started as the wide receivers coach in Green Bay. So, like it or not, that is obviously something that the coaching staff values, is having that one guy that, if injuries do occur, you at least know he's theoretically going to be in the right place, although, as we saw in that Green Bay game, he might get there a tick too slow.
Yeah.
But yeah, I personally also don't really think it's the end of the world if ESB makes it as wide receiver 5. I'm very glad that they got Tyler Scott, because going into the draft, I didn't particularly feel very good about basically needing just one injury to mean that Equanimeous St. Brown's getting serious reps at wide receiver. But
yes, now that's important to note, because I don't think there's a situation where with Scott on the team we have DJ Morgan injured, suddenly Equanimeous St. Brown's on the outside. I think Tyler Scott moves into the outside
no, I think
at that point.
Right, yeah, I would think it. If DJ Moore gets injured, then you have Mooney kind of go into the DJ Moore role, and you have Tyler Scott slot into the Darnell Mooney role, and you leave Chase Claypool where he is. And Equanimeous St. Brown also should not be a thing. So, yeah. But, yeah, just in general, I mean, I think a depth chart where you entered camp last year with Equanimeous St. Brown as wide receiver 2, and this year you enter with him as arguably not even wide receiver 5, like that is a massive improvement. I'm going to borrow from Nate Tice over at The Athletic, who keeps talking about, like, the main goal with this wide receiver room should have been to go from shit to not shit. And I think very firmly they are not shit. And one of the things we talked about, too, is this offensive, or this wide receiver room, it really does complement each other well. Those top 3 guys especially all do different things and all bring different things to the table. Moore is a vertical X. He is a downfield menace. He has managed to get open and make big plays with just atrocious quarterback play in Carolina. And he pairs so well with what Fields wants to do. I don't know that DJ Moore is going to be better necessarily with Justin than he was with the Panthers, just because I still am not sure how often the Bears are going to throw the football. But I definitely think it is possible, just based on what he does best, what Fields does best, and how I think those two styles will mesh. I do think DJ Moore very likely could have the best year of his career this season. I think we could see a level to him that we have not yet seen before, just because of how well he fits what Fields likes to do with the deep ball and things like that. And yeah, Mooney, when you put him inside where he can play off the line, he can avoid the press, where he can just use his speed. There's just so many things there. Claypool, a little bit like Quentin Johnson, where we said a big man who doesn't really play like a big man. I think you, instead of really, kind of giving him the go up and get at balls and stuff quite as often as you would like with like a big X like that, he might be more of like your yak guy, your manufactured, you kind of just throw that guy something quick and let him run after the catch. That's what he tends to do well. But I also think he's a very big, very good red zone threat, too. So there's all kinds of things like there. And then Tyler Scott, like I said, another guy who complements Fields so well, because what he does best is definitely work and win downfield too. So yeah, there's all that. And then Velus, he's probably just going to be the gadget guy if he makes the roster, but I do think he showed in limited opportunities last year he can be really good as that gadget guy, as we talked about. He averaged like 15 yards per touch. Some of those, he had that 49-yard reverse against the Vikings. Some of those manufactured touches, like, he did a good job on them. And he even had a couple deep balls late in the season where he fought and went and got up and got a good deep ball. So if he can just, be a reliable decoy deep sometimes, if he can take those screens, if he can take those handoffs and turn it into something, that's not a bad wide receiver 6 option to have, gadget guy to have either. So if you had to ask me, like, if you told me to put a letter grade on this wide receiver room, I still think it's more like a very good B+ unit, but I think it's a B+ unit made up of multiple Bs. I think Darnell Mooney, or not, I think DJ Moore is like an A. He's not like an A+ guy. I do think he's a true wide receiver 1. I don't think he's in that absolute top tier of guys that's like Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, a couple other guys that I think are just like true game breaking, have to work your entire game plan around stopping them dudes. But I think he's a true number one and that he creates for himself. He's going to command double teams. He can beat double teams. And then I think you have, in Claypool and Mooney, they might be more B minus wide receivers, but I think they both are Bs. So yeah, I think as a room, it's a deep room. There are now 3 to 4 guys you feel good about, and you feel good about them in the role that they're going to be asked to play. Mooney is miscast as the best wide receiver on your team, but we have seen him be extremely productive before as the number 2 option. He had 1,000 yards the last time he had a guy in Allen Robinson, and it wasn't even the best version of Allen Robinson, but he still drew Allen Robinson attention. We've seen Mooney be 1,000-yard receiver there, so I feel really good about the wide receiver room. I do think it's the most improved unit on the team so far.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. What you said about Mooney there, I think you're right. I think this is a B-plus wide receiver room, but I think with the way that they work together, not just with the averaging out of all of their grades, with the way that they are going to work as a unit, I think they could play like an A-plus wide receiver unit because they are all exactly where they need to be. You're right, Mooney in that number 1 spot, he is completely miscast, but you put him in the slot, and suddenly the other guy is overmatched for Darnell Mooney, and it just unlocks everybody else on the team. But also, something we're going to talk about a lot more next week on the defense episode, but we're going to talk about here a bit too, like you mentioned. There's this concept that we talk a lot about. There was this article written, it was like 15 years ago now, but it was about how the difference between a 0-WAR player in baseball and a 2-WAR player is the same difference as there would be from a negative 2-WAR player to a 0-WAR player, right? People always underestimate the improvement from absolute dog shit to fine, to mediocre. It is the same jump in value. And like you said, this wide receiver room last year was undoubtedly dead last in the NFL. There's no argument. Except for maybe mid-season San Diego. Like, maybe they ended up a little bit worse, I think. But even if we hit the low end of what this wide receiver room can be, even if I just, throw my hands up and say, sure, it's like the 16th best wide receiver room in the league, maybe somebody just doesn't play up to par, that is so much better than what we had last year that it's almost impossible to believe that there wouldn't be a massive jump in improvement and in quality.
And I think something that a lot of people, like outside observers who didn't watch the Bears as closely, didn't realize is not only did they have like a bad wide receiver core, like in general, but like it got hurt a lot too. Mooney went down with almost half of the season left. Claypool, they had like one game with Claypool and Mooney together when Claypool, actually sort of knew the playbook. And then Claypool missed a month. The wide receivers that they had what was the lineup for the Bears-Eagles game? I just want to look at who...
And Simba Webster was getting a lot of playing time out there. Dante Pettis had way too many opportunities to drop balls.
Yeah, so the wide receivers who caught passes against the Eagles that week, it was Byron Pringle, Equanimous St. Brown, Nasimba Webster, Dante Pettis. So that was a game where they did not even have Mooney or Claypool. Like, that wide receiver core got worse mostly as the year went along, and it started as the clear worst in the offense. So yeah, I'm glad you referenced that. Not giving those reps just to sub-replacement level players is so huge. Just the assumption, when we talk about how Justin Fields needs to learn how to trust the play and anticipate, it's so much easier to do that when you have professional wide receivers. And maybe they're not stars, but just knowing that you can probably trust that this guy's going to be where the route says he should be.
Right.
That he's not a practice squad player called up this week who doesn't necessarily know what he's doing, who can only run 2 routes. It's huge. The aggregate effect. And I talked about this too, where Fields averaged about 150 yards passing this year. And with his rushing ability, you really only need him to pass for about 200 yards per game this year to really be like a top 10 quarterback in the discussion, given what he brings to the table with his legs. And so when you're talking about him getting to 200 yards passing per game, what that really comes down to is about 50 yards more per game than he had last year, which broken down is maybe 5 more completed passes per game. Do you really think with DJ Moore, Claypool, Mooney, Tyler Scott as his top 4 guys versus Darnell Mooney, Byron Pringle, Dante Pettis, Nasimba Webster, N'Keal Harry. Do you really think 5 more completions per game is that unthinkable? Because I don't. I think it sounds incredibly reasonable. That's what we're looking about. So it's a huge improvement.
I think people are going to be stunned. Some people will be stunned by the improvement they see. That's just because I think they're going to go back and be like, man, was the Bears wide receiver room last year like the worst in NFL history? I think that's going to be the talk at the end.
It was really bad. Well, and I mean, the wide receiver room that he had his rookie year was pretty damn bad. I mean,
because Allen Robinson was dead. I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was glad I was not. I'm sad about it because I love Allen Robinson. I would have liked to see him get that chance to play with a better quarterback, but it was validating that Allen Robinson was completely cooked with the Rams because I was like, was he cooked or was Justin just bad as a rookie? And the answer is no, he was cooked. But yeah, Robinson was cooked. Mooney was obviously good, but I mean, even then, the other wide receivers they had were Goodwin, Damiere Byrd. I mean, that was probably like the 27th worst wide receiver core in the NFL, and then they went to 32, and then they got worse from that through injuries and attrition. So this is a massive improvement. It'll be the first time we have seen Justin Fields play with average wide receiver play at almost every wide receiver position. So that's huge. It's definitely the most improved unit on the roster, no doubt.
Do you want to real quickly go over tight? I don't think we have a lot of hot takes about tight end.
Yeah, I think tight ends, it's not worth really... Chase Allen, I think they do seem to like him. He might be tight end 3 this year. And we already talked about when he got signed. I mean, Robert Tonyan... I don't think Robert Tonyan is amazing, but I do think the Bears now have something they did not have last year, which is when they run 12 personnel, and they run those 2 tight end sets, they have 2 tight ends who are legitimate threats to run routes and catch the ball and be a target. And I think 12 personnel with a running quarterback especially really gives you a lot of options, a lot of ways to put opposing linebackers in a blender. They should get some good play action looks with Robert Tonyan and Cole Kmet, no doubt. There should be some good stuff they could do there. You feel better about tight end as a group too. And then obviously last but not least, we talk about what was definitely... sometimes it's hard to argue which was the worst unit on the 22-22 Bears. Was it their defensive line? Was it their offensive line? Was it their wide receivers? But yeah, the offensive line, if the wide receiver group is the most improved, this is maybe the second most improved unit on the team.
Linebacker exists.
Linebacker did happen. Yes, you got me there. But yeah, on the offensive line, they have added Nate Davis, who they've confirmed is going to play right guard. Tevin is going to move to left guard, which I do think is the right move because, I mean,
Great decision.
I mean, Tevin learned right guard in like a week, so I think he can probably handle left guard with a whole offseason of reps. And he has always said, I think, that the left side is his natural side anyways. He played right tackle at Oklahoma State, but he personally preferred left tackle. I assume the left guard should be the same. And I think his style of play, I don't think the footwork is really the main thing for him. The way he likes to play it, I don't think changing to left guard will be the same. So, either way, with Nate Davis there, solidifying the other guard spot, they should have improved guard play. With Darnell Wright, I think we have said enough on here about how we feel about Darnell Wright.
Yeah.
We definitely think they should have a much stronger... Darnell Wright should be better at right tackle than what they got last year out of Borum and the corpse of Reef. Braxton Jones, you would hope, gets better in year 2. Did get better as a rookie as the year went along. And then you would also hope, and I'm guessing this is the theory they are going with, if they feel that they have solidified the guard spots and simply getting rid of Sam Mustipher, whoever wins out of Patrick and Whitehair in the center competition should have a lot of help with those 2 guards next to him. He should not have to bear the weight of the world by himself. And what I have heard is center for them is one position, and the reason they seem content to go with a veteran over drafting a guy. I have heard they tend to think of center more as a mental position than a physical one. They really think with Fields, especially, what they really want is a guy who knows the protections, can call out the protections, knows the scheme, can kind of make up for some of Fields' deficiencies in terms of identifying those things. And it was something that Mustipher was extremely bad at. The guy was not very good at the mental part of the game, but he made up for that by being even worse at the physical part of the game. But yeah, I did say this too about Lucas Patrick, because once it was clear the Bears were not going to do anything about center, I entered rationalization mode, where I'm very good.
We're Bears fans. We're elite level.
So fucking good at rationalization. But I was going to say, when you talked about Patrick versus some of the free agent center options, and I said, if they sign Lucas Patrick as a free agent today, what I would say about him, to talk myself into it, is last year he was hurt. He missed all of camp and all of the preseason. When he came back, he was playing with a club on his hand, which meant he could not play center, which they said repeatedly was the position that he wants to play, the position where he feels better at it, where he has played best at when he was in Green Bay. He had to play then out of position at right guard, then was moved to left guard when Cody Whitehair got injured. And so he was very bad last year. But you could argue, you could convince me pretty easily that that was the injury and that was not the real Lucas Patrick. Because this is a guy that in over 1,300 something snaps as a Packer allowed 4 sacks. And in 300 snaps or whatever as a Bear, he allowed 3. So, other than his rookie year where he graded just slightly below average, I think it was like a 59 overall pass block grade from PFF. Every other year of his career in Green Bay, he was above average to very good. He had a 75 season as a pass blocker. Has never been a lot as a run blocker, which is probably why they see him more as a center than a guard. But this is a guy who, 4 out of 5 seasons or whatever, has been an above-average pass blocker. The only times he had it was when he was a rookie and when he was clearly injured and missed the entire offseason. So if they signed a veteran center right now, like Jake Brendel, who the 49ers re-signed, if you compared their careers, Lucas Patrick is not noticeably worse than a Jake Brendel. It's just that he's the most recent impression we have of him is a bad one. But I am willing to admit the most recent impression that we have of him was probably influenced more by the injury than anything else. And if he proves he's healthy and he wins the competition in camp, it's probably not the end of the world. He probably can be at least a competent center in terms of physical play, and hopefully should be a big improvement for the Bears over Mustipher in terms of knowing the offense, knowing the looks the defense are giving him, setting the protections, calling out all of those things, identifying the mic, all those things that you want a center to do. So yeah, the one weak link is still center, but I do think there's reason to believe that however it shakes out, the winner of a Whitehair Patrick competition should certainly be better than what they had at center last year nonetheless.
Right, yeah, it's very similar to what we already talked about a bit, in that our center last year might have been the worst center in the league, and we're going to have a guy who is going to be okay at center.
That's the hope.
One of Whitehair and Patrick will be fine. Even if one of them is bad, one of them will be fine. I don't think either of them has a real shot at being great or anything like that. But
I mean, if I wanted to be super rationalization, if I wanted to go so hard into the copium, I would point out that the last time Cody Whitehair did primarily play center, he was downright elite at the position as far as blocking goes. He had some snapping issues.
Snap issues is why he hasn't played it since, so let's hope he's cleared those up.
But if you want to go by PFF pass blocking grades especially, Cody Whitehair was better as a center than he ever was as a guard. He was grading in the 80s. But the last time he played the majority of his reps at center was 2018, which is a fucking lifetime ago in NFL years as far as an offensive lineman who is now over the age of 30. So I don't think that's super relevant. I'm not going to talk myself into him as a center based off of what he did 6 years ago or whatever at the position. But if I was going hard into the cope, and if you're listening and you want to cope harder than I am coping, there's your cope. Go for that.
Yeah. Yeah, so the big thing about this offensive line, I think, is last year going into the season, and when we talked about going into the season last year, this was one of my big harping points, because I thought the two teams who were going to compete for the number one pick would be the Bears and the Jets. The Jets was wrong, because I underestimated the shit out of that defense. But the Bears, my reasoning was this. The wide receiver room and the offensive line were starting the season as a second-string unit. Our best-case scenario last year was that we would have a decent second-string unit playing the whole year for us, right? This Bears offensive line has a pretty solid starting five. I think if things go middle of the road, this is going to be like maybe the best-case scenario, what would be like 15th best in the league. If they all play throughout the year, maybe like 20th, right? They're okay. It's a decent unit with some good stars. Now, here's the problem. Part of the reason I think that Whitehair and Patrick could be good is because they're flanked by two very good guards, I think. Both guards, I don't like to talk about injuries.
Questionable injury history.
They sure get hurt a lot. And Tev, specifically, I am very concerned about his back. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'll give you one quote for this one. If Tevin Jenkins plays all 17 games, if he starts all 17 games, I think the Bears win the North. I think they win it by a full game at least.
Wow, you think it hinges that much on Big Tev? Okay.
I think if Tev sticks in there and doesn't get hurt, I think that's where we're at. I think as soon as Tev goes down, there is a domino effect. We really don't have a backup guard specifically, and that is fucking dangerous with these two guards.
So, yes, I will say I am interested to see how camp shakes out this year as far as the depth at guard goes, because one guy we have not mentioned tonight, but who is still around, is Alex Leatherwood. And I think we saw enough of him at tackle, and they saw enough of him at right tackle last year to abandon that. I mean, obviously they went out and got Darnell Wright. So which again, very anti-Jerry Angelo move, because you can bet your ass. I know in my bones,
yes.
Jerry Angelo would have said, Alex Leatherwood was the 17th overall pick 2 years ago. We still think there's untapped potential there. And by the way, spoiler, when we talk about the worst Bears tournament here in a couple weeks, I'm going to have 3 different guys I'm bringing up as Jerry Angelo's special bargain bin finds on the offensive line, because he... but I know in my soul that if Jerry Angelo was still the general manager of the Bears, Alex Leatherwood would be getting too much of a chance at right tackle this year. But, and this is damning with faint praise, his best position when he did play with the Raiders was left guard. He was still a bad left guard. But I need to stress that, he was such a bad right tackle. The Raiders at one point removed him from a preseason game because they did not feel that they felt he was a danger to the health of their backup and starting quarterbacks at right tackle in the preseason. So,
that's
it's
the guy, to be clear, you're trying to sell me on as depth at guard?
No, I'm not trying to sell you. I'm saying he's a guy that I'm interested in hearing. I think their plan now, though, with Darnell Wright on board, since they have that guy, I think they intend to leave that guy. I think they intend to leave Leatherwood at guard, let him rep solely at guard, and hopefully prove that he can at least be a backup there. Because, the physical tools there are still ridiculous. There is a reason that guy was drafted number 17 overall. I am very glad they're not in any situation where that guy's even in a competition to start.
Yep.
Because again, previous Bears administrations would absolutely have just left that guy in a competition to start and said, "Well, it was a first rounder. What do you want from me?" But I do think there's enough talent there that you could talk yourself into. Well, maybe he'll show enough in camp. Maybe with a whole offseason to learn the playbook. Maybe with a whole offseason of coaching from the Bears. Maybe he will show enough that they do feel good about him as a backup guard. Ja'Tyre Carter maybe Jatyree Carter, guy that they drafted in the flurry of offensive linemen they took last year, guy they kept on the roster all year. They didn't even put him on the practice squad. They wouldn't risk him on the practice squad, even though he didn't play. They basically redshirted him. I have heard that they like him, that they are high on his potential as a future guard. So I do think part of the reason we have not seen them sign a veteran depth guy on the interior like we thought is I think they do at least want to give those guys camp reps, preseason reps, to see if there is something there. And again, great that they're not. I think these guys are going to be in a competition for backup guard, not starting guard. I do think those are the two guys that are worth watching as maybe they think they have something there, not to start, but as depth, and a guy that maybe does step in if Tevin gets hurt, and a guy that if he performs well in Tevin's absence, maybe that is the guy who gets a chance to compete to start next year. But then I do think if camp comes and goes, and the preseason comes and goes, and they are not impressed with either of those two guys, like they're hoping to be, Carter and Leatherwood, that's when I think you might see like a cut down signing of like a surefire veteran depth guard to come in, and because I don't think they will go into the season trusting that Tevin Jenkins and Nate Davis are both going to play the whole season if they don't feel good about at least one of the guys behind them. And I do think, like I said, I think with both Jatire Carter, who's gotten a redshirt year, and I think with Leatherwood, there are reasons to just let them have that battle in camp and see what you have. But I don't think they'll be complacent and just roll with those guys no matter what. I think if those guys don't impress in camp, don't show progress, they will go out and get another guy on the interior as insurance for a Tev injury or a Nate Davis injury. That's the one. I think we feel very good about those two guys as starting guards. I will agree. The guard depth kind of concerns me a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the other spots on the line. We have two centers, essentially, who are going to compete for playing time. So if one goes down, the other one goes in. I don't think we're too worried about that spot. I think at tackle, do you want Larry Borum to start 17 games? Absolutely not. Do you want Larry Borum to come in for a couple of games? I don't think that's going to kill you. If Darnell Wright or if Brax go down for a long period of time, yeah, that's going to be a big issue. But if Larry has to go in because somebody, broke their toe and they're out for 2 weeks, I'm comfortable with Larry Borum being in that position. I think that's a good spot for him. At guard, I don't think we have that. I mean, the two guys you mentioned, man, that's a scary thought. But also, like you said, last year, Bull showed exactly what he's going to do when cuts start happening. He's going to go out and take the guys he wants. And I think if last year the guys he got, Schofield and Reef, were backups, just solid backups all year, and we didn't have to be like, guys, you need to play and play well, I think those would have been pretty good pickups. And I do also expect, somebody's going to cut a couple guards. I think we're going to add to that spot with some depth. But I do have to judge it based on what we've got right now, and right now those guard spots feel like the weak link, to where if either of those links breaks, the entire rest of the offense is going to be in trouble just for one spot.
All right, let's end this here. What would you, if you had to put a letter grade? So I put a letter grade on the wide receiver room. If you were to put a letter grade on the offensive line as it's currently constituted, what's your letter grade there?
Right now, I'm going to say B-, because there are too many questions. I don't have a question about Darnell Wright, personally. I think that dude is going to be great from day one. Braxton Jones, he was very good, but we've also been in this position a lot as Bears fans, right? Where a guy improves, and then we just say, that's our guy, and then he never improves again, and the Bears keep saying, that's our guy, but he just kind of mid. So he hasn't been a great left tackle yet. I do think he has the chance to become that, so I do like him. Tevin Jenkins, as long as he's playing, could possibly be a top 10
and that's why I asked, because I think you have to factor in the depth heavily on the offensive line, and you have to factor in the injury risk.
Nate Davis is the same way. Great guard, fantastic right guard. The dude isn't going to play 17 games. He hasn't shown the ability.
And that's why I think right now I'm a little bit slightly more negative than you. I'm going to give the unit as a whole a C plus. I think
see that.
I think right now I'm at like a solid B for the starting 5, but I would give like
yes.
I think that the current backup situation, until I hear some things in camp, until I see some things in preseason, those guys are like a D for me. And offensive line injuries are baked in. It does not take a lot of injuries on this offensive line to get me pretty nervous again. But yeah, I do. But I also, like I said, I understand the logic, and I definitely think, like I said, I think you use camp to find out if you have something in a guy like Leatherwood, if you have something in a guy like Carter, and if they're not looking good, then that's when you go out and you add another veteran into the mix. I mean, one thing I'll mention is Michael Schofield's still out there as a free agent. Yeah. I almost think, like, worst case scenario, if you're not liking, you have mini camps coming up and early camp, if you're not liking what you're seeing at that point, maybe you give Schofield a call and you say, because I feel about Schofield a bit like I feel about Larry Borum as a tackle. For one, I don't think either of them is as good as PFF said they were. I don't think they're good. Either one of them is a good run blocker, but both of them, at least in pass protection, generally tend to get in the way. They are not good pass protectors, but they're also not awful ones.
They're competent backups, is what they are.
Yeah, so I do think that's always a possibility, too, that could be in the back pocket. Maybe they're just like, well, we're not signing Schofield right now because he's a veteran and we know what he is, but we also know that he's still out there. And right now we want to give these reps to some younger guys. We would like to try to find some guys. I think Ian Cunningham and Poles both would desperately love to become the Eagles, where there is a guy behind every guy. And so I think that's why, Carter, Poles guy, high RAS, a lot of athleticism, but came from a small school, obviously needed the redshirt year. If they think there's something there and they want to give him the reps in camp to find that out, I'm okay with that. But I don't think if that guy is not performing in camp, if Leatherwood's not performing in camp, I don't think they will just let this room sit the way that it is. But as it is right now, because of how it's constituted, and because I don't feel good about the backups yet, it's still a C-plus unit for me. Which is, I mean, again, this was an F- unit last year.
Yes, that's very
It was an F- unit last year. And I think even in the best-case scenario, last year's line, if everybody had stayed healthy and they'd had the starting 5 that they wanted all year, that's still that is like a D-plus unit at best.
Yep.
With F- depth. And what we got,
I mean, C+ for this offensive line should be considered such an upgrade in one season.
Yeah, C+, and like I said, I think they have B starters, and if those 5 guys stay healthy against all odds, I think it's going to be a good unit. But I mean, I do think at the offensive line especially, you bake in injuries into the prediction, and that's why I got to give them a C+ right now. But I think, well, if camp rolls around and people start saying, like, hey, Ja'Tyre Carter really has impressed, he has shown huge improvement from year 1 to year 2, and I have heard they like him a lot, then that makes me feel a little better. If Alex Leatherwood is just left at guard, left to his own devices at guard, they're not messing with him at tackle anymore, and he starts to solidify and he starts to fix some of the footwork and hand issues, that's a guy that could still be, I mean, he is still a high upside dude. And I feel a lot better, like I said, about that guy competing for a backup job than competing for a starting job. But as it stands right now, with the information we have at hand, it's a C+ for me. So,
yeah, I mean, I think we saw what Poles liked to do last season, picking up guys right there at camp, guys who had either been cut or guys who had been available that whole time, and he just waited them out. If he does the same thing now, and those guys are slotted into backup roles, and we've still got these high upside guys, I think this could be a really strong, offensive line room with a decent bit of depth. And yeah, I mean, we did this last year. We did the same thing. I honestly bet that even if Carter or Leatherwood looks good, I bet he still goes out and grabs a couple vets. Maybe even at tackle. Maybe even you're looking at a guy who got cut and he's like, I'm just going to put a backup at tackle or something.
I still do think, I'm still a little surprised that they did not find a replacement for Borum. Not that I don't think...
They like Larry.
They benched him. They benched him for Riley Reef. But no, Not that I think he's a bad swing tackle. I think he's a pretty competent
This is a dude who's going to be around for like fucking 7 years for no reason.
He's not a great athlete, and he's not the body type and the scheme fit they look for. So I thought they might swap Borum for a guy who isn't really better than Borum, but fits their scheme better than Borum. But so far, they're still rolling with Larry. The last thing I will say, the last thing I do, and we'll end the night on this, but did you see Larry Borum's reaction on Twitter to when they drafted Darnell Wright?
I did.
I felt so bad for the guy, but God, it was funny. He just tweeted LOL and then deleted it. And I kind of wanted to be like, son, you got benched on the league's worst offensive line last year for Riley Reif. Did you really, up until this moment, think that you were still their guy? Like, were you not prepared for this possibility? Because you really should have been.
Such nice things to me. And
the exit interview went well, I guess. Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, that's where we're at on the offense. I think as a whole, we expect this to be this half of the ball to be more improved than the other half of the ball, probably, which we'll talk about next week. I think because we have more position groups that are question marks, I think, on that side of the ball than we do on this side of the ball, which is rare for the Bears and feels kind of nice. So,
yeah.
All right, well, we'll see you folks next week. Go Bears.
All right, good night.